Hello, nurses, and welcome to another edition of Animaniaugust. Today we're going to be looking at the month of September of 1996 with another batch of new episodes that were released on Kids WB. It starts out with episode 83. We get a Sloppy Skibby intro, animated by Wang. And and this is pretty much actually kind of uh, a backdoor pilot to seemingly a backdoor pilot to Sloppy Squirrel that was never made. Well, because, well, in a similar way that Spellbound was to Pinky the Brain spinoff, which actually was made. I assume that this spinoff wasn't made either due to Slappy being a female character and possibly not wanting, Warner's not wanting to alienate the male demographic, or the just the decline in popularity of Tom Vooger's cartoons in general around this time, or just both. We never got what wrong exhibit is one flew over the cuckoo clock. And this one Slappy tries to watch TV, but all it shows are ridiculous cutters, and she goes to a breakdown. This, of course, is obviously a parody. The title is a parody of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and 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 it's obviously supposed to be a satire. Now Slappy's just a grumpy old cartoon character that just hates everything. And, you know, honestly, it definitely is just a remnant of a concept that, of course, never innovated. Honestly, it is basically a preview of what was meant to be a Slappy Squirrel spinoff. And just like that special intro, this segment was also animated by Wang. But the stinger at the end actually was animated by Tokimori Shinsha, being one of the last times that they provide new animation for an Animaniacs segment. Moving on, we get to episode 84, starting off with Cutie and the Beast, a parody of Beauty and the Beast. And this features Dot as Belle and Taz as the Beast. There's a lot of jokes in here. I especially like the scene where Dot just can't get her lines right, like banana Folana or Dot swearing, albeit of course bleeped, or hello princess, just or the parody song instead of Be Our Guest, it's We Are Pests, and it just there's a lot of funny jokes here, and really. And honestly, my favorite one has to be, oh, thank you, Mr. United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, big whoop. It's just funny because, well, he is Mr. United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama. Next up is Boo Happens, a parody of Forrest Gump with Chicken Boo. He starts out as a career in college football, which leads him to meet the President John F. Kennedy. And then he becomes a hero serving in war, leading him to meet the President once more. And then he plays competitive ping pong, and honestly, just So I just Forrest Gump if it were a chicken boo. It's basically what you would. It's basically what you think it is. I especially like the scene where Richard Nixon says Boo is not a cluck. Yeah, it's obviously a reference to his I am not a crook speech. And and it's just hilarious. Newell. And this parody of Newell, they this is a parody of the Newell, and and oh, the Spike Christmas Fiend aired September 96. And then the Force of Colden, Yakko, Wagon Dodge, and in a MST3K style thing, they make cracks at all the people listed. And, well, they turn out in horror. As it turns out, their mics were on the whole time. This is also the last segment, the final regular segment to be animated by Tokyo Movie Shinsha, although they would return in Wacko, which we'll cover at the very end of the Animaniaugust series at the end of the month. And, well, after that, and then we get to episode 85. We start out with a segment, the intro, Animaniagrats, which of course is a parody of the iconic intro of Rugrats. Yakko takes the place of Tommy, Wacko takes the place of Chucky, Dot Angelica, Phil and Lil are replaced by Skippy and Mindy, and then this intro, Dr. Scratchy and I think Hell Nurse replace the parents and Stu and Dee Dee. So that's pretty cool. And then of course it gives a variable line, Bangor Mania. And then there's Pocahontas. Rugrats and Pocahontas parodied in one episode. Gee. If just, yeah, this is just literally just a bunch of, yeah, within, like, yeah, this is very 90s. Like, yeah, this is, you have Rugrats and Pocahontas reference back to back. And there's a lot of fun, and it's probably my favorite Disney parody of them all, simply just because of how much they trash on this movie and Disney as a whole. Mel Gibson. Okay, John Smith isn't John Smith in this. It's literally Mel Gibson. He sounds Australian and he has brown hair. He even wears Mickey Mouse shorts, because, Disney. And I really love the song, Just the Same Old Heroine. It's a parody of those award bait songs, including the Pocahontas song, Just Around the River Bend. And And it's just hilarious because, well, just referencing how cliche that they were, and it's just funny. And about how they would win the Schlosser, and people would pay $7 and they would buy the video anyway, despite of the cliches. And the lyrics are clever. First I turned an aerial, and then I rang a bell. And and of course the characters. This segment's also alternatively known as Polka Dottis, which is uh, Dot's nickname in this, and the Warners are Native Americans, and well, the ending gag is that they is that well, John Smith is that they open a chain of ice cream restaurants at the end, and and there's also a reference to the fact that Pocahontas is accused of ripping off Dances with Fools of all things, as as Yakko says, when Dot refuses to marry Wacko, Yakko says the story sounds familiar. And and Wacko's nickname is actually Slobbers with Wolves. Another reference to that film. Heck, Mel Gibson is splattered in the face with blue paint, giving him the Braveheart look. And this is another one where Rafen Ruger's voice was pitched up electronically because of puberty. Next up is Boys in the Hood. The good veterans are now in Burbank, and they get run over by Thaddeus Block's the CEO's car. And so they get revenge on not Plots, but Ralph the Guard. And oh yeah, and at the end they make Ralph the plus car. There's also an original version of the cartoon where there's a different prologue, which actually has them tormenting plots. But that was just replaced with Ralph. Honestly, I think the original version was much more better. It's just not even Ralph's fault, really. Ralph was only really waxing the car. It wasn't even his car. Next up is Mighty Wacko at the Bat. It was a parody of Casey at the Bat, which, mind you, was already adapted by Disney in that one of their package films. I think it's Make My Music. Um, I'm okay. I think it's Make My Music. But they said to parody this. Great. Two Disney parody segments in one episode. And in this episode, the ending is actually, unlike Casey and the Bat, the ending is actually generally just more uplifting. As in the original version of Casey at the Bat, Casey loses a game, but here Wacko wins the game. Next up, we get to of the episode 86, where it's a variable line Fraser Craney, which the animation in this one is actually similar to the Mark Twain one. Anyway, very, 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 very special show is parody of educational cartoons meant to shove morals down your throat. And this one is where Nyako and the rest of the Warners try to win a prestigious humanitarian award, which, which, which of course, the Warners, of course, decide to become green to win this precious humanitarian award. They do this by talking about how fossil fuels are ruining the planet and how objectifying women is wrong and how you should watch your calories. But then but then they eventually lose the award and literally go back to and literally disregard the moral they just preached. And this is actually one of those rare special episodes. Like Pinky the Brain would actually do one that was actually pretty straight. Inherit the Wheeze, which showed the dangers of smoking and animal testing in lab research. And the very funny thing is that Kids WB, when they merged, after the Hanna-Barbera Turner Warner merger, whatever thing, they actually used this part of this footage out of context to advertise Captain Planet. Even though this is, even though Captain Planet, let's just say Captain Planet wouldn't be a big fan of the ending. They go back to fossil fuels, they go back to objectifying women, they go back to eating stuff, especially Wacko, goes back to eating excessively. Really, this is just hilarious of a parody of those very special episodes. And really, that were really just part of TV shows like, like abortion, birth control, sex ed, racism, sexism, death, narcotics, pregnancy, among other things that were usually talked about in shows that just come out of nowhere. And of course, and this is also notable for for be considered some of Acom's best work for the show. And the characters are much more high quality and well drawn. Next up is Live the Living Buns, compared to Night of the Living Dead. And the only Buns mini cartoon where Buns does not get scolded at the end. You could say it got thrown a bone. And of course, they finally really realized that Buns Mini aren't good at being cliche chase cartoons. So you got a lot of horror parodies. You got you got Mike Buns becoming Michael Jackson and Michigan J. Frog appearing at the end as a pot shot to the Warner Bros. Network. And many even quotes one of the slogans of the Warner Bros. Network at the time, which was "Kiss the Frog, Baby." This is actually such a solid cartoon that even Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Mindy, and yes, the same Nancy Cartwright, the same Miss Bart Simpson, that was her favorite Bud's mini segment, and I can't blame her. That's a solid. So the jerk. After drinking milkshake one gulp, Wacko gets a bad case of hiccups. And so they look around to see what will cure him. This is another one. This, you know, and after a very, very long hiatus, the running gag of Dot's horrifying pet returns. Although this will be the last time we see it in an episode of Animaniacs. And there's also a scene that actually parodies A Clockwork Orange, which, needless to say, is a movie that I don't think the target audience would exactly, per se, get the references to. Needless to say, but all in all, it's another episode starring Wacko. They've really done a whole lot of Wacko episodes as of late. There's a whole lot of Wacko and just really, with the reduced amount of, subsidiary characters, by this point, really, by this point there was just Warner's Slappy Squirrel, Buns and Mindy, and 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 uh well, and Chicken Boo. But other than that, really by this point, besides those characters listed, the other characters have long kicked the bucket by then. There was no more good idea, bad idea, no Randy Beeman. Yeah, let's move on to the final one of the day. Episode 87. We start out with Mr. Heaney. Perfect with Love. In a parody of the James Bond 007 films, siblings are created to help Invincible Bond foil the evil schemes of Ray Blowfinger. This this was definitely a fitting parody. At the time, there was a whole James Bond fad, and which would really peak the year after this episode aired, with both GoldenEye being released for the Nintendo 64, uh, uh, and and of course, and just and actually, in the film Tomorrow Never Dies, and of course the legendary parody Austin Powers being released. Well, it seemed like James Bond was, despite being created all the way back in the way back when, all the way back back in the 1950s and before, and really only became actually known among the general public when he was adapted to film in the 60s. And well, now the Warners were starting the parody, and and this would actually be the second time of a James Bond parody, with the previous one being The Chicken Who Loved Me, all the way back in episode 60. And some of the character models in an office set piece was actually borrowed from that. And the opening short song of the segment actually varies Diamonds Are Forever. And the cartoon is billed as a Weed Mimlo production. And if you don't know, Weed Mimlo was the in-universe creator of the Warner cartoons. And next up we have Angels of Warners. Dr. Scratch's two friends to go on a cruise to get away from the Warners, but they booked their own tickets. There's a lot of antics on this episode. The episode Romp from Take My Siblings Police naturally returns as they continue to torment poor old Scratch. And yeah, even on a cruise, they just can't get away. You just can't get away from the waters, like, at all. And, I don't know, we've seen a lot of animation studios come and go over the course of the show. We've seen some that only animated select few, some have animated a lot. And then there's Wang and Acom that have animated a lot, a countless amount of segments. But what about an animation studio that's only animated a singular segment? A studio that was fired, basically done for, after only a single segment. What could the studio's name possibly be? What was the segment they animated? What was it? And trust me, may have been the first to only animate one episode, but it wasn't the last. Its name, it was located in Budapest, Hungary. Operated under the name Varga Studios. And animated when you're traveling. The final segment we're going to talk about today is When You're Traveling. A song literally about time. And time zones and stuff. He first starts talking about how you stand in an airport and you look on the clocks around the world and there's different times for all. And there's just definitely a lot of stuff that's just interesting. Like, Yakko says that if the Earth were closer to the sun, the year would be much shorter and you would have a lot of fun. Which, honestly, I don't think you'd be having a lot of fun if you're literally just burning all day. I mean, like, you know, like, it's like, just crazy talk. And, of course, there's foreshadowing to recent events as when Yeko says in the lunch in the Ukraine, the guy's eating behind the Russian palace in St. Petersburg, Russia. But, you know, what gives? This is but you know what gives? Yeko considered Palestine a country, so really, so not really. So territorial disputes are definitely, very confusing, really. Actually, very confusing. And, you know, but, you know, and Yakko even mentions how Wacko sings about Dot sings how you can waste time, and Wacko says, which is what we're really doing right now, which is just a meta reference to just the fact that they're aware that they're wasting time and they just don't care that they're wasting time because they're they're the warners. I mean, it's not like they care whatsoever that they're wasting people's time. They just waste people's time. And then it ends with the fact that about how he's confused about how people can be born in different time zones. If you were born in if I were if you were born in China and I were born in Carolina on the same second, and why should you be a day older than me? Man, Yakko actually asking the questions that keeps up a personal night. People say Animaniacs is just a bunch of stupid educational stuff, but man, this is really moral. It's just really just uplifting, like really, just think about it. And enough with the sarcasm. This is just another one of those iconic songs that was educational, and honestly, you know, it's definitely good. You know, well, we still have a few more about over a minute to go. So we're just going to talk about some things. Well, we have exactly around about only 11 more episodes to cover throughout this entire show, which is just crazy to think that we're almost at the end of this thing. And the show's ended in 1998, so, by this point, new episodes were already sporadic. And, well, and, you know, it was really just, they were really trying to stretch the show out as long as KWB could. As, the popularity among the show's target demographic was already starting to wane. Most of the viewers were adults, and the executives just really they liked Animaniacs enough that they were willing to let it have a proper ending, but they didn't like it enough that that they were willing to renew it more. Well, as I always say, goodbye, nurse.